Hi everyone, this is a tutorial of a coda.io tool that I created called Splitting Costs with Friends. And if you've been watching some of the YouTube videos on the channel, you'll notice that I also created a YouTube tutorial of the same exact tool, but in Google Sheets, which is here. So this tool, again, is inspired by a blog post, which I wrote a couple years ago called Splitting Costs with Friends Just Got Easier. It's right here, and you can take a look at that, and I'll put a link to it in the video. But I wanted to basically take the exact same tool that has become quite popular for those of you readers out there in Google Sheets and try to translate it into a Google Coda doc. So some of the concepts in this tutorial might be pretty advanced, and I'll try to do another video just about tables kind of 101 in the future. So what is this tool? It's actually the same exact, pretty much the same exact thing as what this tool does in Google Sheets, where you enter a bunch of your costs in, the amount that the person paid, who paid for it, and also who participated in the cost. And then the tool automatically spit out how much each person owes for what they paid and what they owed, and everything kind of balances out in the end. So how is this tool kind of organized? So the first section, these are called sections in Coda, is kind of like a basic README on how to use this tool. Whoops, how to use this tool. And there's instructions here. And then the main tab or main section is this enter your costs section. So I'm going to minimize this for now. So what you have here is actually like a blank view or part of a table. And I'll get into what this is in a bit, but basically when you have this form for your friends on the trip, you basically show them this is where they should enter in their costs, right? So I'm going to start writing in a few costs right now. So let's say the first cost is, let's say we just went on a trip to Vegas and someone bought dinner for everyone. So let's say dinner first night or second night, the cost was, say, I don't know, $100. Who paid? I have a bunch of fake users here. I'll just pick Jim Coda Test 1. And then who participated? This is actually where you put in how many of your friends participated in this cost. I'm going to say Al, Jim, and William here. And then click out. Oops. And that should have added the cost to the master table. So this section right here, the master data section, shows all the costs associated right there. And so here we go. Here's dinner second night, $100, Jim Coda, who participated, per person cost, so on and so forth. I'll get into more into this master table in a bit. So let's try entering another cost just to make sure that it's working. Let's say someone else bought, let's say, I can't think of anything right now. They bought souvenirs in Vegas. I don't know why you do that, but why not? $50. Let's say William paid for it. And then let's say only William and Coda Test 3 participated. Hit enter. And once you notice how like everything's kind of grayed out a little bit, once you click out, it goes away. And the reason why is because this is a view on the master table that filters out anything where the item is not blank. So I'll get more to that later. And then down here, you can say trip is over, yes or no. And then also finally, who is the money collector? So you have to designate someone to collect all the money from all your friends. And then that person will basically pay everyone out at the very end of the trip. So you can pick anyone you want. And these are called controls in Coda, where you can select, basically have like a drop-down menu right into your doc. And then down here, this automatically calculates how much each person on your trip owes, or how much they paid rather, and then also how much they owe. So when the trip is over, you can click on this thing and say yes. Actually, notice how down here it says this trip is still happening. And then when I say yes, it says the trip is over, pay the money collector if you owe, collect if you are owed. And so what this does here is, let's say for Jim, you notice when I hover over his name, I can actually see the individual record for Jim Coda Test and how much he's paid and all this other stuff. But it shows that he paid $725 for all his costs on the trip, and he owes $538. So that means he paid more than he is owed. So he needs to collect from the money collector, who you designate here, $186. Compare that to someone like Coda Test 3. I know these names are terrible. I should have picked better names for these test accounts. But Coda Test 3 paid $250 for all the costs on the trip, but he owes more than he paid for $130. So that means he has to pay the money collector $280 to kind of make sure his balance is squared out. So this text kind of manually changes based on whether or not the person pays more than they owe or if they owe more than they pay. So it's kind of a nice, clean summary of how everything should be laid out so that the money collector knows exactly who to collect from and also how much to pay to each person, right? And these people here know exactly how much they have to pay and how much they owe. So this is basically the tool. It's really simple, but creating it was a bit of a challenge. And I want to walk you through kind of the back end and how this actually works. So everything in this tool is driven off of this table right here, this cost table. And I'm going to, I guess, zoom out a little bit so it's a little more, you can see a little more. But essentially what I did was I created a table. This is a table in Coda, right? This whole thing that's highlighted. You have item, cost, who paid. Remember, these are all columns that we had to enter in this thing right here. Who paid, who participated, and so on and so forth. And you notice like there's multiple names and selections here. Then these columns over here to the right are things that are not shown to the end user. So the per person costs, which is essentially the total cost divided by the number of people that participated in the cost, right? And then what's interesting is you have to create individual columns for each person on your trip. So what if the person, let's say if Coda Test 2 participated in this cost, then there would be an $80 here. Now, since Coda Test 2 did not participate in this cost, car rental, notice it's just Jim Coda Test 1 and 3, the per person cost is $275. But since Coda Test 2 did not participate in this cost, this is 0, right? So you kind of have like, this is similar to the ones here that we have in Google Sheets, except I just break it out with the actual individual costs. And so you notice that some people have zeros because they basically did not participate in the cost, and therefore they should not be charged for the costs, right? So that's all good. And then up here, the reason why I have this separate table for people is because sometimes you want to have a nice list of people you want to invite on your trip. And so you'll notice that I have all the people listed out with their email address. You can actually calculate how much that person paid right on the table. And this calculation is actually based off of this table right here. And then this table right here has names from this table right here. So there's actually a circular reference going on here. But circular references, which you'll notice pretty quickly in Coda, don't throw errors as they do in Excel. So that's kind of a cool and neat trick, which takes some time getting used to because you're so used to having circular references that throw errors and you have to figure out how to debug them in Excel. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. So originally what I wanted to do was have a nice table that showed the amount the person paid and the amount that they owed, right? So this is actually a pretty simple formula. Let's see if I can get in here. Yep. So basically I take the cost table, which is right here, and I filter anything. Notice how this who paid column has individual names. You can only select one person. I filter that column by the name field, which is right here. And then I take the cost from the cost table, which is right here, and then I apply the sum formula to this column. This formula, believe it or not, took some time getting used to because I wasn't sure where to put the cost field that I want from this table, and also where to put the sum formula or function in my formula. Like I thought it would have been cost.cost or cost.filter, then somewhere you put the sum formula. And I guess basically kind of realized there's like kind of a, this is what they call in Coda chaining, or if you're into programming, like object-oriented programming, I guess, where you have the object, and then you have some kind of method, and then you have a property here, and then another method or function to apply into all this data. So that chaining syntax took some time getting used to, but I think just after some experimentation, it's kind of like learning how to use an Excel formula. You kind of get used to it. So the reason why I couldn't figure out how to put another column, if you guys have a way to figure it out, for how much the person paid, or sorry, how much the person is owed, is because you notice here that this column right here contains multiple values, right? This contains everyone on a trip. This one only contains Al, Coda Test 2. And I couldn't figure out a way to quickly loop through every single row and to see if this individual person, let's say Coda Test 3, existed in this column, right? So I wanted to basically see, does Coda Test 3 exist here? Yes, then take the per person cost. Does the person exist here? No, then don't include this cost. So because I couldn't figure that out, and if you have a way of doing it, that would make this tool so much more automated, definitely let me know. So in lieu of that, I had to create these manual columns for each individual person on the trip, and then kind of put their per person cost in the individual row. And then so finally, when you summarize all the data in this cost breakdown, this formula, well, this first of all is just like a person. There's nothing really special about that. But these formulas right here, cost.filter, who paid, this is basically taking everything from the cost table, again, filtering by the person, and then also taking the cost and then summing it. So it's actually the same exact formula that you'll see in this column right here on this people table. And then this O's is basically taking all the costs from the column in the table with that given person and adding the sum. It's a really simple formula. It's essentially taking this column right here and summing it up, and then taking this column and then this column, summing it up for each individual person on your trip. And then this is kind of a cool little feature. I mean, this is not, you can do this in Google Sheets too, but it's an if statement. I mean, it's highlight if statement where I named these, I've named these name formulas. So this amount, $400, is named Al paid. This one is named Al owes. And for each one, I did the same exact thing, right? So this one is, I believe, Coda 1 paid. This one is Coda 1 owes. And I use those name formulas in the actual formula in the text here. So where I say, if the amount that the person paid is greater than the amount they owe, then they have to collect money from the money collector. Otherwise, they pay to the money collector. And that's how this conditional text shows up in the doc. And this same thing here, I basically take the absolute value of the amount paid minus the amount owes, so that you know how much that person basically needs to collect or owe. The reason why I did absolute value is so that I don't get any weird negative numbers in the cases where they have to pay the money collector. So just kind of like an optics thing. So yeah, that's basically how the tool works. Would love to get your feedback. I'll include links to the original blog post and the Google Sheets tool. Really quickly, I tried to do, so Coda has this option to kind of like copy and paste from Google Sheets, where you do something right here, where you do plus table copied from Sheets. And when you do that, whoops, that's not what I want to do. What was I want to do? Table import from Excel Sheets. If you want to, they just copy and paste from Sheets into Coda. So I tried doing that. Basically copied this sheet right here, the original splitting costs with friends tool. I copied it into this table. And as I imagined, it's basically like a nonsensical table that's created. Like there's no formulas, the values are hard-coded. So copy and pasting from Google Sheets really didn't do anything. I really had to build the tool from scratch, which is fine because I wanted to do it and I wanted to make it a little more functional than Google Sheets. So that's what this table is. So I wanted to kind of summarize the pros and cons of using Coda versus Google Sheets for this specific tool of splitting costs with friends. So pro, structured form to enter in costs in a relatively error-proof way. That's this guy right here, this thing right here, which is a little cleaner, I think, compared to Google Sheets, where you basically have a huge spreadsheet and you have to insert rows and then like put in costs and then put in ones and zeros and stuff like that. So it's just a little cleaner, a little more organized. It has more of an application feel versus a spreadsheet feel, which could be more user-friendly for certain users, but it really depends on how sophisticated people are. My guess is that most of your friends probably know how to use a spreadsheet, so this is probably not too crazy technical, but you never know. The summary, another pro is a summary view of people on a trip when you hover over their names. So this is kind of a cool thing where when you hover over their names right here in the doc itself, it shows up the person. So if you ever need to chase down someone to like pay you back or pay money back to you, this could be a nice handy tool, and it gives you their full kind of history of whether or not they made any edits in the spreadsheet or the Coda doc. So that's kind of a neat thing. But given the fact that you're going on a trip with your friends, hopefully your friends aren't too bad about paying you back. And then finally, this is kind of one of the core features of Coda, which is ability to hide the master data from users through views. So with Google Sheets, you have this entire spreadsheet which you have to share with your friends, and they have to edit it, and basically everyone gets access to this, right? With Coda, I have this master table called costs, right? And you notice there's a lot of columns that are kind of redundant, and not redundant, I mean that aren't really relevant to the user, which are your friends and your trip. And so what I did was, this is a table, but this right here is a view. You notice how it says view of costs. And so I applied a filter where I filter out any rows where, or rather I show rows where the item, the cost itself is blank. So this is actually a view of the table. So the minute that you enter in any cost in this table, it adds it to the master table down here. And it's a nice way of hiding kind of all the irrelevant data for the user to the table, right? So that's a really nice handy dandy feature of Coda tables, is that you can hide master data and create multiple views based on who the user is, what they need to see, and what their use case is for the individual use for the tool, basically. Some cons, and I actually think the cons in this case, and at least in the current implementation of my tool, outweighs the pros. So writing formulas for summary bullet points were manual, not easy to copy and paste. What does that mean? When I had to write these formulas, so I first wrote this one formula, right? Where I had this formula, cost filter, and then how much they owe, collect money from money collector, and then I just copy and pasted that 1, 2, 3, 4 times in each bullet point. And I expected to easily be able to edit the formula for Jim and for Coda Test 2, but I actually had to rewrite the entire formula, because if I tried to just edit the part that changed, like Jim Coda Test 1, the formula would throw an error, and so it was a lot more cumbersome to create these formulas because I had to rewrite everything from scratch, which kind of sucked, but I'm sure Coda is working on making this a little easier to use. So that was kind of a pain in the ass. What else? Manual creation of individual columns to total up cost for people on the trip in the master table. So I talked about this already during the explanation of the table, but because I couldn't figure out a way to loop through each of these individual multi-select columns to find if the person participated in the cost. So if you want to use this tool, you have to manually create individual columns for all the people on your trip. And then additionally, you have to create formulas where you have to use this in formula where you have to see if the person on your trip participated in the costs, and then you include the per person cost into that column. So that's a bit manual and not as automated as I would like, but it is what it is, at least in the current implementation. So definitely took a lot longer than using Google Sheets or Excel. And then, I mean, not really a con, but would have been nice to see is no conditional formatting on text or numbers in a doc. Notice here in the Google Sheets, I have like red and black to indicate whether or not the person owes or is owed. Over here in the master summary, I mean, I have text saying collect money from money collector or pay the money collector, but it would have been nice if I could make this red and this green. Like this, this could be, I mean, conditionally, this would be cool if this would be green, and I'm not even sure how to do that. I haven't tried playing with the font color here, but I don't think they have font and fill colors yet. But essentially, conditional formatting, there is a ton of conditional formatting on the tables themselves, but there isn't conditional formatting right here. This conditional formatting, you can add conditional formats and a bunch of blah, blah, blah. But there is no conditional formatting on text or numbers, or basically any kind of data you put into the doc itself and not in the table. So having said all this, I think in the current implementation of this tool, I would actually still use Google Sheets over Coda right now for doing this simple operation of finding out how much you should owe your friends on a trip, because to set this up for a new group takes a little bit of time, and unless you know how to change the formulas and edit the formulas, this is not really meant for the average, I would say average user. Whereas Google Sheets, this is pretty simple to use. You just enter in ones into the columns for people that participated in the trip, and it gives you a nice kind of handy output table to show how much people are owed or owes. So yeah, that would be my kind of recommendation for now if you decide to use this tool. Again, there are certain things I think are meant to be used in Coda versus other things that are not. This might be a situation, unless I think some of these bugs and features I can figure out how to fix are solved. I think that certain tools are meant to be used and are more efficiently used in a spreadsheet, such as Google Sheets or Microsoft Excel, where everything is shared, versus Coda, which I think is right now is a little more geared towards project management and project, maybe kind of CRM kind of use cases. But this was a situation where you're trying to force almost like a round peg into a round object into a square peg, or whatever you want to call that kind of analogy. So yeah, that's kind of the gist of this tool. I know I went a bit long here, but I really wanted to show you how this could be built and other tools can be built in Coda. I think one thing I do like about the Coda doc here is that it summarizes everything very nicely, and it gives kind of like an application feel to the tool, whereas this is much more just hardcore spreadsheet and might scare some people away. Anyways, thanks again for watching this video. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment in the YouTube video or on the original blog post itself. There's also a video on how to use this tool on Google Sheets as well, so take a look at that, and thanks for watching.